want to welcome everyone here and also say Happy International Women's Day. And I just want to take a moment. It is 3:27 on a Friday afternoon of this session, and we have so many people here, so I want you to give yourself a round of applause. AI is very popular, and appreciate you showing up in the room today. My name is Keri Smith, and I would say I'm very grateful to be here, and it's been really a refreshing experience for me so far in the program, and hopefully all of you are enjoying it and just soaking it all up. And the topic that I'm going to cover with you today is the AI edge, speaking about trends, talent, and adoption. And I'll share a little bit about myself. I run Accenture's data and AI business globally for our financial services clients. And I've been with Accenture for about 5 years. Prior to that, I come from the world of entrepreneurship. So I am a descendant of entrepreneurs, and I have been a founding member of several fintechs as well. So I've been in the space of data, AI, and emerging tech for all of my career. And what I would say, if I take a pivot and talk a little bit about AI is not new, right? It's been around since the 1950s. But you may be wondering, why does there seem to be so much focus around AI, particularly in the last 2 years? And a big part of that is really the emergence of generative AI. I think most people would be familiar with Gen AI, generative AI, ChatGPT. And what I would say is generative AI is the first emerging technology in the history of human development that has had such a massive pace of innovation, as well as, I would say, mass global embracing of this technology. And a key reason for that is language mastery. And what do I mean by that? As you've interacted with ChatGPT, you will see that with these algorithms, I'm able to interact with them and get an outcome without me necessarily having to have really specialized technical knowledge, right? So from a 5, 6-year-old to 80-plus-year-old, leveraging ChatGPT, whether it's to come up with menu for my garden party, whether it's to be able to help me with my homework assignment, my speech, or like my father, if you're having an existential moment and you want a therapist, he's used ChatGPT in that manner as well. So we're seeing a lot of usage around the world, and obviously we bring those same personas into the workplace, and that has driven some of the adoption of the capability as well. What I wanted to do is just take a little bit of a moment, though, and talk about, I would say, the last 2 years of journey with generative AI and what we've seen as some of the evolution. So earlier this year, in January, I had an opportunity, my first time, to be able to go to the World Economic Forum in Davos and represent our firm there. And if you're not familiar with the World Economic Forum, this is basically where world leaders, head of businesses, come together and talk about, right, what are the really important issues, a lot of times also focusing on climate, sustainability, etc. In this year, I would say the number one topic was definitely around AI and generative AI. And what I would say is that I've seen a really big shift in terms of mentality regarding generative AI. And that is people not asking why anymore in terms of why should I care, why should I use AI, why should I use generative AI, but also basically thinking about how now. How do I actually harness the power of this capability to drive value for my business? So if I rewind basically to 2 years ago, I would say there was a lot of skepticism in the market around generative AI. People were basically wondering, is this the next new fad? Is this basically Metaverse 2.0? Should I stay on the sidelines? What should I really think about generative AI? Then we started to see leading firms saying, okay, as we look at this emerging technology, we want to at least have a stance, like, what does our company think about this, right? What is our policy? How do we want our employees to be able to access this capability? How do we set up the right secure guardrails around this so that we can safely and wisely experiment with that? And if I think about some of the leading firms within that, financial services definitely were some of the first public examples. The reason around that is it's a highly regulated industry. They have a lot of familiarity with leveraging AI, but also how do I manage data, right? How do I have responsible AI practices around that? Again, now, fast forward to where we are 2 years later, I would say every industry is looking at generative AI, leveraging it. It has a transformative impact across all industries, with financial services definitely being in the top grouping of it. But what we're seeing right now is almost 70% of industry groups have at least one functional area where they're leveraging generative AI. So as we're having conversations with senior clients at Davos, I want to share with you kind of a couple of the things that they were grappling with, some key questions around it. One was definitely around the business case. Okay, we've done some experimentation, we've done some proof of concepts. We want to start to think about how do we scale this capability, but I'm unable to make the business case to my board and my CFO. So how do I actually think about value? And as we at Accenture, we've done now several thousands of these generative AI programs with our clients across industries. And what we've seen is that most of the experimentation and POCs, or what's been in production to date, has been focused really around cost optimization and productivity improvement. So just giving you some examples of what that is. I would say developer productivity, when we think about our technologists as they're writing code, et cetera, that's kind of a very common example of where people were using generative AI. Other areas are, I want to be able to get my customer the legal contracts faster. So I'm leveraging generative AI as an accelerant with that. I need to be able to get access to my knowledge management systems and my search capabilities. I want to be able to have higher quality data, more insightful answers. So these are some common use cases that were, I would say, in the early parts of the generative AI journey. Where we are right now, we're seeing applications really across most of the enterprise. But while, again, the majority of the focus has been on cost optimization and productivity improvement, what we've seen with some of the C-suite and the board now is they're saying, okay, I believe this technology is real. I'm actually able to see some very encouraging results on it. As I'm thinking about scaling, I want to understand where in my organization should I really double down and place those investments, as well as then how is it that I actually think through some of the other challenges that I'm seeing as I'm trying to adopt it. So one of those areas, by the way, the timer is not going down, so if someone can help me with that, so I make sure I don't cannibalize my next panelist time. So yes, as the other thing that comes up a lot is then around talent, right? And there are multiple levels of the talent question. So in some cases, we have some of our clients saying, okay, we've built a capability, it's working. Why on earth is nobody using it? Why are we not seeing the adoption that we expected across the enterprise? And that answer can have kind of multiple reasons. One is, I would say, trust. So as we look at it from the employee point of view, we actually see employees are actually very open to AI. They want to use it. Again, they're using ChatGPT in their personal lives, seeing good results. But the trust issue comes up with, I don't appreciate how my company has rolled out AI. There's not a lot of transparency. You're not telling me how you're going to use it, what's your vision, and what's there. And because of that lack of transparency, I'm actually worried about, are you going to use it to take away my job, etc. So there's part of it which is just a trust issue regarding transparency. The other part of it is, I'm not, as I'm thinking about some of the generative AI and the systems there, I'm not doing human-based design. What do I mean by that? As I think about some of the interfaces and what the employees have to use, I have not thought through the way that they're actually doing their day-to-day work. So I've not designed some of the systems and the user interfaces in a way that's intuitive for them. So therefore, I already have so many things on my plate for my job. You're giving me another new system, another tool to do. I'm not going to waste time on trying to do it. Obviously, if you're mandating me, I'm going to do it. But then you're not going to see a lot of the adoption or positive energy around that. Where we've seen successful cases around employee adoption is one, companies being very clear around this is how we're looking at AI and generative AI for our firm. We also want to make sure that we're raising AI literacy across the enterprise. So we want everybody involved in this, and we're rolling out training programs. But as we're thinking about particular use cases, if I'm looking at my know your customer risk and compliance processes, if I'm thinking about my contact center, if I'm thinking about my frontline sales, I'm going to have you, as the employee-based, actually involved in the upfront design. So with one of the clients that I'm working with, what they did was they actually brought some of their frontline employees in terms of, as you think about the future of where we want to take the business, as we think about what's going to actually optimize your day-to-day work life, what would be the future for you? How do you think about that? And as you think about generative AI as an accelerant, what do you think makes sense? So one is being able to get the voice of the employee upfront in some of that design, but also then as you're starting to be able to get results from the algorithm, doing what we call blind testing. What I mean by that is, this is what the humans were normally doing, here's what AI is doing, what is the correct answer? And by them seeing also that AI is actually, in some cases, outperforming, right, what we were doing on a BAU basis, there's trust there. But I would say the biggest positive impact that we've seen is where people are finding that using AI in their day-to-day work is actually reducing a lot of the manual and nonsense activities, right, that they didn't really want to spend time on. That's where we've seen the highest level of adoption, where not only am I having a voice in the upfront design, not only is my company being transparent about how they use it, not only are they rolling out enterprise training programs to be able to help upskill us all, but also I'm actually experiencing the impact of this in what I'm doing day to day. So employee adoption and the trust factor was something that definitely came up a lot. What I would say that I'm encouraged about with the use of AI and generative AI is just we're starting to see really strong examples in terms of impact, both in terms of efficiency, but also in terms of P&L impact for the companies. And as I kind of take a step back, I would say one note for us all as we think about this, AI is not going anywhere. It's going to become more and more pervasive. And what we've seen is that employees who are using AI are definitely outperforming those who do not use it. And so as I think about us and wanting to make sure that we're leading from the front, one of the things that we want to be able to do is be ongoing learners, embracing the technology, and being able to kind of go forward to say we need to be able to have our voices involved as well as we're looking at AI and the applications of it. So wanted to share a little bit of that in terms of the insights, but I would say the trajectory over the last 2 years in terms of where this capability has gone has been really mind-blowing. I think there's a lot more to be able to be done as well. And we're going to be able to start to embrace and understand a little bit more what does it truly mean to have a human plus digital workforce. So we work a lot with our HR and talent teams as well in terms of what's that organizational mindset that's needed to be able to leverage this technology. And what I would say is for many companies, generative AI was more of a barometer regarding how good is my company in terms of when new things happen, how adaptive we can be. And so many firms saw that, hey, we were not as smooth as we wanted to be in terms of even articulating what our company's stance on this capability was. Or we were not where we needed to be in terms of actually informing our employee base regarding how we want to use it, or even thinking about how to prioritize it. We didn't have the right operating model to have business, technology, risk talking together. So it was a good idea because we're talking about generative AI now. In 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, it may be something else, right? So we want to be able to have that alertness and that agility to be able to say, how responsive am I going to be to change? How can I embrace it? And again, for us here, I would say, how do we lead from the front? Because it's going to be critical for us to be able to have relevancy. So I know I've said a lot around this. I do want to be able to pause for a moment because I wanted to interact with you as well. So I wanted to give a time here to be able to allow for questions. There are probably going to be more questions than I'm going to be allotted in my time slot, but I'm happy to talk to people afterwards as well. So I think we can go to the question. People can just come to the mic if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please. Sorry, that's not my final close, so I didn't give the right signal for the applause, but yes. I'll do the close after the questions.
Hi.
Yes, please.
Yes, I'm Denise Nelson, and I was recently at Google Cloud focusing on our AI narrative with C-suite engagement, and specifically from a global campaign perspective, building the storytelling narrative around productivity and responsible AI, which is the governance that you touched on. My question, and you kind of spoke to it, people are flooding to generative AI specifically because of the language models and ChatGPT, Gemini, just throwing that in there.
So you know your stuff.
Anyway,
so sorry, go ahead.
So if we're gonna teach, let's.
Yes, right.
So my question is around
Yes.
what's next, and so AI agents. What are you hearing about AI agents and its ability to help companies monetize faster in terms of their development cycle, getting to market faster, bringing in smaller businesses perhaps, and being a revenue generator?
All right, that's a great question. Thank you. So if I look at, as I mentioned to you, that we have done now several thousands of these generative AI efforts with our clients. As you start to do more and more of them, what you'll start to see is patterns in terms of, even if I'm doing a use case in my risk and compliance area, or if I'm doing it in my sales area, there's some common elements across every use case, meaning every use case I'm going to need data. So I'm going to have to extract data from some system. I'm going to have to do some level of analysis around that data. I'm going to have to do some recommendations. So as you start to do more of this and as you start to think about scaling, an important part of this, particularly around cost effectiveness, is I need to have more and more reusable components. Every new use case that I'm doing, I cannot have to repeat all of the same steps. So when we think about the idea of AI agents, a big part of that is thinking about what are a lot of those reusable components, and how do I create that in terms of autonomous agents that can actually help me. And that concept is the idea of a utility agent. So I can have one that's helping with data extraction, one that's helping me with analysis, etc. But also, in order for me to be able to harness the value of generative AI, I need to be thinking beyond just siloed use cases. I need to actually think across the entirety of a value chain, right? So what we're seeing with clients as they're starting to scale as well, the AI agents are helping with basically that end-to-end piece. So I would say a couple of drivers for it. One is basically cost effectiveness. I need to be able to have a lot of reusable components. I need to be able to get to things faster and be learning, right, from some of the patterns that have developed from the previous ones. But also what we've seen with many of companies as they've had budget cuts and having to be a bit more savvy regarding how do they use their limited funds. I'm not able to hire as many people as I wanted, and so therefore it's forcing then how do I drive a lot more with less, and being able to have more of that automation through AI agents is driving that as well. To your question about revenue, these can be applied to any part of the value chain, not just for cost optimization, but as I'm thinking about my sales team, helping with then product launches, et cetera. So hopefully that helped answer it, but I'm looking generally in that area. I didn't know where you sat down, but hopefully that, okay, sorry. Yes, hopefully that answered the question for you. If not, please see me after. Yes.
Hi, thank you. My name is April Weathers, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for 110. 110 is an organization that's focused on skills-first approach for helping companies to hire individuals without a four-year degree. The reason why I find that that is relevant is because a lot of what you've talked about here, especially in that sort of human and technology talent play, is something that I'm not hearing talked about. I feel like what I'm hearing a lot right now is here's how you should get yourself educated on what are the AI tools, but you mentioned that piece around like how are HR and talent departments thinking about their FTEs going into the future, utilizing both human and technology implements. And I was just curious, like, what are some of the strategies or questions that you're hearing people talk about as they're getting to that point? Because from our perspective, we know that skills will be a big part of that because you're not just looking at their degree anymore. You need to know what they're capable of and therefore what tool will fill the gap. So wanted your perspective.
Thank you for that. So I would say that one of the things that we have to remember for generative AI, it's still fairly nascent, right? It's an emerging technology. But I would say because of the momentum and what people are starting to see as the results now, we're starting to see a lot more momentum in terms of, okay, I need to actually get my operating model in the right place for me to tap into this more. So many companies started on the training side more looking at self-service, but what they were seeing then is, in some cases, my board or some of my C-suite sorry, I shouldn't say it in that way. What I would say is sometimes people have an unrealistic expectation of what AI and generative AI can do. But what we're getting a lot more of demand now is for board and C-suite to actually understand the technology from a technical level, because what we're seeing is that they're not able to guide their teams in the right way because they don't have that understanding. So that's one. But what we're also seeing from the HR and talent departments is that I need to actually have a more systematic way that I'm actually doing training, and I need to actually have ongoing upskilling. So as I start to roll out more of the AI and generative AI use cases there, for example, if I'm doing it in my finance area, my HR area, my risk area, there's business-tailored training I need to do. There's also what I need to do from the tech team. So I would say that there's a significant increase in demand around training programs, upskilling, and also to think more about the organizational mindset that's needed to be able to really embrace change, right? Because I think more and more people are seeing that that's just going to be a constant, and how do we do that? So different levels of that answer. Do I have time for one more question? Where is my boss? First, okay. Do I have time for more? Okay, right there. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies.
Hi, good
My
afternoon.
name is Rashaya Shan. I'm representing Liberty Bank. And you spoke a lot about how corporations and businesses leverage AI for cost optimization
Yes.
and improving productivity. I'm speaking for people who may feel like this is over our heads. It's a lot of terminology, tech talk. How can we leverage this in our how can we make it practical and leverage AI in our everyday personal lives?
in your personal lives, not your corporate lives.
Right.
Okay, all right. All right, so let me think about that. Well, I'll talk about some ways that I've leveraged it in my personal life. One is just in terms of, and I'll bring my family as an example as well. I have two sisters. They have children that they are raising, and so sometimes they leverage ChatGPT, generative AI, to just say, as I'm thinking about having this conversation with a teenager, what would be the right way that I need to frame it, that it would actually land with them? And because we're tapping into the knowledge corpus of the entire internet, etc., it brings a lot of diversity in terms of that answer. So one is in terms of difficult conversations, content for that. If you're doing speeches around it, as I mentioned, people are using it also for menu planning, games. I mean, anything that you can think about in terms of you tapping into much faster research and information set. That's a common example, I would say, in your personal life. I would say that people are also using it from an entrepreneurship perspective as well, as they're thinking about new markets, product segments, right? Where do I actually want to penetrate? It basically is a tool that allows you to get very easily to that information set. That's number one. But also then as you start to think about different personas, and how do I communicate something to a person that's coming from this perspective in a way that's going to land with them, but that also covers my agenda. So because you asked for personal, I'm giving that as a couple of examples. With that, my time is up, but I really appreciate your attention, and again, I'm happy to talk afterwards as well. Thank you very much.